Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. The middle of April has already delivered a ton of drama in the sports world, and to think it's just getting started. Glad that you're here with me to indulge on all that's transpired and what lies ahead, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And just a quick housekeeping note, there is some construction going around me. There's people banging, sawing, buzzing, things of that nature. So if it does come through to your earbuds, headphones, speakers, etc., my apologies ahead of time. There isn't anything I can do to control that. Here it is as an independent podcast and / content creator that I am. Of course, I'm doing this in the friendly confines of my apartment. I was thinking of confines and apartment at the same time. So let me enunciate and put it together here, JAYREELZ. So for those who are listening, my apologies if you do hear anything over the course of the next hour plus. There isn't anything I could do, but hopefully one day I'll transition to my own studio space where I'll have nothing but soundproof audio, no outside noise coming in or anything like that. So one more time, just a quick mea culpa, and hopefully it doesn't go off the rails when it comes to the noise outside of the apartment. All right, let's get to it. So much to unpack here over the course of the next hour plus. And as I talked about April being the best sports month dating back a couple of weeks ago. And on top of that, the drama that has ensued here, whether it comes to a Final Four or a championship setting, as we saw last week with Florida and Houston, and how they've been able to come from behind and win a national championship. You've also had the NBA, which I'll get to later on, with the West as wild as it was down the stretch, and including yesterday, where we had a team fall out of the top six, and a team that we didn't really expect that now has to host a playing game tomorrow night, that being the Golden State Warriors. But even if golf is not in your wheelhouse, even if it's a sport that you can't really gravitate to, or it's the old man sport, or it's boring JAYREELZ, or I can't get wrapped up in it, and that I totally understand. But if you did watch, or maybe in this case, if you didn't watch, you missed theater at its biggest stage. And this is one of the reasons why I love sports. This is one of the reasons why I love doing what I do. Because yesterday was as riveting, as compelling, as edge of your seat thriller. That's what it was, which ended up being a classic Masters tournament. No ifs, ands, buts, babies about it. And with the focal point being on Rory McIlroy, it was exponentially even better. You could times it by 10, because even if this was a situation where, if you want to say it was Tiger Woods, if he was healthy, or Phil Mickelson, or any other golfer that's out there, whether it be Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka, who has not won a Masters tournament, or anybody of that ilk, you could certainly look at what had transpired, and if that was them, it would certainly be of the utmost drama and intrigue, etc. But because the main character in this story yesterday and pretty much all weekend was Rory McIlroy, as I talked back on Thursday, this made for one of the great sporting events that we'll probably ever see, maybe even for the whole year in 2025. And I understand we still have all of April, May, summer, fall, and before we even get to drop the ball for 2026, there's still plenty to go. But this is going to be ranked up there. That's all there is to it. And I'll try to encapsulate this in a nice, tidy package, because this tournament unto itself could be a podcast all alone. And for McIlroy, as we talked about, as he struggled in the back nine on Thursday, where he was even after the first round, and Justin Rose was 7 under and had a 7-stroke lead. And think about that number, people, because that's going to be very interesting as we move this story along. So with Rose having a 7-stroke lead over Rory McIlroy after day one, and if you had guys like Bryson DeChambeau and you had Corey Connors who were at the top of the leaderboard, and then that's where McIlroy all of a sudden just took off. Friday, Saturday, bounced back nicely to the point where come yesterday morning, he was at the top of the leaderboard, or really Saturday night, where he was 2 strokes ahead of Bryson DeChambeau. And even though you had Ludwig Åberg and you had a couple other golfers there at the top that were hovering around, where it could have been a situation where if a logjam would have ensued, where you would have had 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 golfers in the mix at the top of the leaderboard, that in its own right would have made CBS just do backflips. And as they are, I'm sure they were drunk off the Dom Perignon last night. As I like to say, they were certainly the kale salads and the potatoes au gratin and even the chocolate mousse went down rather smoothly last night if you're the powers that be for the network there, CBS. But now, with everything that had transpired over the first 3 days, and of course I can break that down, but really let's just get right to it. Even though you had a scenario where Justin Rose had played well throughout the course of the weekend, but dropped down after leading Thursday, Friday into Saturday and fell back there after the third round where it was all Bryson DeChambeau, where obviously McIlroy with the 2-stroke lead, 12 under, where DeChambeau was -10. And then you had the Corey Connors of the world and the Ludwig Oppers, like I mentioned, that were hanging around. And now you get to yesterday. And it was interesting because right from the opening tee, the opening hole where Rory McIlroy double bogeyed. And it made you think, oh boy, are the snakes going to be in his head? Is he already starting to unfold? And we haven't even gotten one hole in when he double bogeyed. And even though Bryson DeChambeau birdied 2 and 3, where he ended up taking a 1-stroke lead, and you thought to yourself, this is going to be the biggest point of this match, because if McIlroy were to unfold here, if he were just to all of a sudden go south, and then you would have had all of the naysayers and all of the prognosticators, including yours truly, but it's just based on his track record, nothing personal, to where now he's going to fold like a cheap suit. He's just going to all of a sudden unravel, and he's not going to be able to corral whatever emotions or whatever that's been pent up, as he mentioned in the post-match yesterday, for over 10 years. Him not even winning a major, let alone this one, the last one that he needed to complete a career Grand Slam. And for McIlroy, who was able to somehow, some way find a way to get laser focused, to get to a point where he was able to par on the next few holes, and then DeChambeau started to go backwards a little bit. And then you had a scenario at 9 and 10 where McIlroy started to heat up, and he got back-to-back birdies on those 2 holes. Next thing you know, after 10, Bryson DeChambeau was falling back in the rearview mirror of McIlroy, and then here came Justin Rose pretty much from that point on, as I'll get to in a second. But now you had a situation where McIlroy was now 4 strokes ahead after 10 holes with 8 to go. And it looked like there was not going to be any drama here on the final round at the Masters, to where, can we even think that Rory McIlroy could put his feet up and just coast to a green jacket? Well, as it was, that was not going to be the case. Because even though with guys like Ludwig Oppberg and even with Justin Rose, who Justin Rose was 2 holes ahead of him, but he made a furious comeback. And in his last 8 holes, he had 1 bogey, but he had 6 birdies. And he came all the way back to when he got back into the clubhouse, he was at 10 under. And it was a situation, it was 11 under. And it was a situation where Rose had to be put on ice to wonder whether or not McIlroy was going to be waiting there in a playoff, or McEnroe would have just, McEnroe, you hear me? McIlroy's, my apologies there, Rory. McIlroy was just going to all of a sudden get to that 18th hole and putt his way to a Masters championship. And that's another big one, which I'll get to. So now you had a situation where McIlroy at 11, remember, he just finished the 10th hole, back-to-back birdies, 4 strokes up. Amen corner. What happens? He hits the ball, which is very close to being out of bounds, where he did lose a stroke there and ended up double bogeying on that hole. And it was a situation where, okay, do we now think back to the first hole where it looked like he was going to double bogey? In fact, let me just double check that. I believe he bogeyed on that hole, because then he bogeyed on 14. So now it's a situation where, no, he doubled on 11. That's right. It was amen corner. I got it mixed up. So on 11, he double bogeyed. Then on 14, he bogeyed there. And now it's a situation where on 15, he had to rebound, because things were starting to fall apart. And as he got to 15, that's where Oppberg got in the mix, to where he drew even. And then Justin Rose at that point, although he was 2 holes ahead, he also drew even. So now you had a situation where the 4-stroke lead after 10 by McIlroy now was in a flat-footed tie with the aforementioned Ackberg and Rose heading into 15. And on 15, he had a big shot there off the tee in which he parred. And then he had a situation there on 17, which was enormous because for him to start off that hole where he drove the ball over to the trees and it looked like he was going to be in danger. And what did he do on that second shot? Landed an approach that was 2 feet from the cup. Just an unbelievable shot, curved around the trees, onto the green, and next thing you know, he was putting for a birdie, and it looked like he was going to be home free. And then now you get to 18, where Rose, again, in the clubhouse under 11, and then you had Ackberg, who just fell apart there on 17 and 18. Not only did he bogey on 17, he triple bogeyed on 18, which put him out to sea and was done for the tournament. So now it made you wonder, all right, well, what happened to Bryson DeChambeau? DeChambeau, although had a good round, but good is not good enough when you're trying to get to win a Masters tournament. He had to be great. And unfortunately, even though he had that one-stroke lead early in that final round after the third hole where it looked like maybe it was going to be mano a mano from that point on to the 18th hole, but all of a sudden things weren't working for him. It was a situation where as Rory was just pulling away, DeChambeau couldn't find his stroke. He couldn't find a way to get back into the mix where Justin Rose and Ackberg all of a sudden went past him standing still. And then now you had a situation where DeChambeau was not to be found. Obviously, it was the thing where Ackberg was just gone after that 17th hole and even more so on 18. So now it became between Justin Rose and Rory McIlroy. So now when McIlroy birdied on 18, all he needed to do was just go for par and that would have been it. So what happens? He gets to the 18th hole, and interestingly enough, when Justin Rose, and this is just funny how golf is, Justin Rose on 18 had to make a 20-foot putt, and that 20-foot putt saved him because he knew that if he would have missed that putt, he would have been done for the tournament. And I understand he had to wait to see what was going to happen with McIlroy as far as what he was going to do on 18, and especially 17 as well. And of course, 17, he made that unbelievable shot, as I mentioned. But then now you get to 18, where Rose makes that 20-foot putt, and now you have McIlroy, who literally has a 5-foot putt to win the tournament. And what does he do? He pushes it. It goes, I believe it went right. And now it's a situation where you have a playoff. So think about this if you're McIlroy. You started off the day 2 strokes under, or 2 strokes ahead of DeChambeau. You double bogey right out of the gate, and kudos to McIlroy for rebounding and bouncing back from that stretch from hole 2 to 10 to where he became 4 under. But then the old McIlroy came right back, as I discussed in holes 11 and 14. And then even though at 17, when he hit the ball in the trees, you thought to yourself, all right, here's going to be another instance where let's see what McIlroy could do. And obviously placed that shot 2 feet from the cup, which made him go birdie. And then now he misses a 5-foot putt to go home, to win the green jacket, to finally get that career Grand Slam. And he missed it. And right then and there, you thought to yourself, and I know I thought to myself, I said, he probably just lost his tournament. Because how does he bounce back from that? How does he know, knowing that he was that close and knowing that all he had to do is just make a 5-footer and he missed it? That's almost like the team that loses the game in regulation in the NBA when they had a chance to win if they're an underdog, and then they go into the overtime and that's it. Or same for the NFL, even though the NFL rules are different, I get it. But it's one of those things where you had that opportunity to seal the deal. And when McIlroy did not, in the back of my mind, to the front of my mind, when he missed, I said, he may have lost the tournament. And this would have been the ultimate gut wrench, kick to the groin that anybody would have ever imagined for this particular player, for everything that has transpired, dating back to what I just mentioned at the top. The drought, not winning a Masters, 17th time there on that course where it's eluded him. Even going back to 2011 when he had that 4-stroke lead and he spit the bit. And now here it is. He has to go to a 1-hole playoff, or as long as it would have gone. But starting off at the 18th, where both shots on the fairway, and then the second shot by Justin Rose looked like, and this would have been unbelievable, it actually hit the cup. I don't even think it hit the pin, and I wish we could have got a slow-mo on that. But when it actually had a chance to maybe even go in the cup, and could you imagine that this would have been the way that Rory McIlroy would have lost his tournament, considering it fell on him to miss that putt, and then for Rose to have a shot on the approach on the second shot to actually hit the cup. And maybe that was a omen from the golf gods, that because he did not sink that, which would have been an unbelievably miraculous shot, and actually luck, let's just call it as we see it with Rose, it went further enough to where when McIlroy on his approach there on 2 in the playoff actually fell 3 feet from the cup. And not only that, but it had that backspin, took advantage of the slope, which went down. And that was the thing. When the ball landed, I thought to myself, all right, where's this going to end up? Because we knew that the slope was going to be there. We know 18, we know that green and that hole. And it was a situation where, all right, let's see if it's going to either go close or if it's going to just drift off to where it's going to be not necessarily an unmakeable putt, but a putt that's certainly going to be dubious at best. So now Rose has to make, in essence, what looked like a 9-foot putt, which obviously he tried to examine from here to Timbuktu, looking at all these different angles. And there was a part of me that thought that maybe this is gamesmanship on Rose's part because he took forever. And I get it. This is for a green jacket. This is for the championship. This is for the Masters. And Rose, if you remember, was in second place last year in the final tournament there at the Open. And here it was, a situation where he could be a champion and really would have been maybe to the chagrin of all the Rory McIlroy fans that are out there. But he had a 9-foot putt, which was difficult. And you could just tell. And he did take his time. I get that. But he knew that he had to be as perfect and near perfect to try to make the shot. And when he missed it, I thought to myself, that wasn't a makeable putt. That was going to be tough. If he would have sunk that, who knows what the pressure would have been on McIlroy, considering that the approach that he had there was 3 feet from the cup. But then I knew at that point, I said, this is a slam dunk. If he misses this putt, then I don't know what is going to be in store for McIlroy as far as him winning any tournaments moving forward. But here was the strange thing, and this is the crazy thing about golf, twofold. So just like I mentioned, Rose makes that 20-foot putt where McIlroy couldn't make the 5-foot putt. And now here it is in reverse where you had a situation where Rose had to make that putt in order to keep his chances alive and maybe even win the tournament, and he missed. And then McIlroy at 3 feet, what did he do? Sunk the putt, threw his arms up in the air. The putter went backwards down to his knees as he just, all the emotion came out. And that was 10 pianos on his back. That was all the pressure in the world. And the most craziest thing of all, think about how things come full circle. Like I mentioned, McIlroy after day 1 was 7 strokes behind Justin Rose there after the first round. And then on that 10th hole where McIlroy went up 4 on DeChambeau, he was 7 strokes ahead of Justin Rose at that point, where he made up all that ground, like I mentioned, with the 6 birdies, even though he had the 1 bogey. But because of the double bogey there by Rory, and then, of course, the bogey there on 18, brought him back into this tournament. And because of those putts, the one that Rose made on 18 in regulation and the one that McIlroy missed, well, now it's flipped in reverse to where McIlroy is now not only the 2025 Masters champion, but he got the career Grand Slam. And I hate to say this, I know this is going to sound bad on my part, but I have to be real and be true to you guys and gals who listen. There was a part of me that was not rooting for McIlroy. I mean, and I know that's very masochistic of me to even say. And I got nothing against Rory. Nothing at all. I understand I didn't like some of the comments that he made with the whole live golf thing where he tried to make it PGA and live and to be the poster boy and just the spokesperson for the PGA, which in essence that he is, considering what he's done early on in his career and the guy that obviously a lot of the tour looks to, because you would figure that with Tiger now, obviously in the final stages and the twilight of his career, now Rory is that guy, and especially after yesterday, he is definitely going to be the figurehead of the PGA. But there was that just slight part of me that just thought, I don't know if I want to root for this guy. I don't want to see him win. It wasn't a matter I want to see him lose. I just didn't want to see him win. But you know what? Kudos to Rory McIlroy. And like I mentioned at the very top, it couldn't have happened any other way. Because like I said, if this was going to be a situation where he was up 4 with 8 holes to go, what was he going to do? Win by 6, 8 strokes, and it would have been no drama? It almost would have been beyond anticlimactic to think that this guy who had just been languishing and just been hurting, and think about this, when he was even after day 1, he didn't even speak to the media. It was almost as if, oh, I don't want to deal with you guys. And to me, I thought that was a bad thing on his part. Come on, go to the media, talk to them for a few minutes. It's only the first round. And I get it, last year when he lost to Bryson DeChambeau in the U.S. Open, that he just jettisoned himself out of there to where he didn't even speak to anybody. I understand he was hurt and crushed and so on and so forth. But this was after the first hole, or the first round, excuse me. Why would you even think about just saying, I don't want to deal with you, when then the next day he got himself back into the tournament and he was right in front of the microphones as if nothing happened. So to me, that was a bad job on McIlroy's part. I got to call it like I see it. And maybe that was even another reason why I didn't want him to win. But you know what? He gutted it out after double bogeying on 1, after what happened there in the back 9 on 11 and 14, making that shot on 17, missing the putt on 18, and then obviously securing the win there in the playoff. I mean, what more can you say? Just a, pun intended, masterful job by McIlroy. He deserved it. He definitely now, I think for him moving forward, it's going to be gravy. Watch him win 4 majors in the next few years. Watch him now all of a sudden just take the golf world by storm. Because remember, this has been hanging over his head, shoulders, heart, soul, guts, everything for over a decade. And on top of that, this tournament was the last one that he needed in order for him to get that career Grand Slam. Now, let's say if he would have won the PGA next month, if he did not win the Masters yesterday and the U.S. Open and even the British, to where, let's say, if he would have went into those tournaments, and even if he would have won those, yes, it would have been a relief. Yes, it would have been like, thank God, it's finally over. But he would still have to deal with the Masters because he knows that that's the final frontier in order for him to be an immortal. Now, granted, immortal in this regard as far as the career Grand Slams, when it comes to Gene Sarazen, when it comes to Ben Hogan, when it comes to Jack Nicklaus, when it comes to Gary Player, when it comes to Tiger Woods, now his name is in that sentence for guys who won the career Grand Slam. He's the 6th guy to do so. And now he doesn't have to worry about that. So I would think that going into the PGA next month, he can miss the cut and miss it by 1,000,000 strokes. You think he's going to care? Of course, deep down inside he will. But my point is that it's not going to hover over his head anymore. He's not going to have that dark cloud. It has been lifted. It is over. Whatever demons were exercised, everything happened yesterday on that golf course there on the 18th hole ×2 in the playoff against Justin Rose. And all I can say is congratulations. Just a stupendous, a gutty, gritty, just overall masterful performance. Because I'm sure if this was Rory last year, he would have folded. He would have shrunk. The spotlight would have been too bright. But because he came into this tournament playing well, and obviously a lot of people knew that he was going to be the big story here. And sure enough, after that opening round, where he was just even, he took off, and boy, did he go through the battlefield, I'm sure a lot personally, than having to deal with the guys around him that were battling for a championship. But he came out smelling like roses, and like I said, it couldn't have happened any other way. It had to be this way. And for him, I'm sure this is even 10 times sweeter. Because if it was a thing where he would have went going away, which I'm sure he probably would have preferred, but one more time, there would have been no drama, there would have been no suspense, and yesterday you got that, and like I said, which was a classic Masters Sunday. It didn't start out that way. Well, it started off that way, but from holes 2 to 10, it looked like, oh, this is going to be nothing really to watch here. You can forget it. But boy, did it start from 11 on, and it was just as riveting and as enthralling as any golf sport that you can watch, or any sport that you can watch. Forget about golf. Any sport. And that's why by the time we get to year's end, this is probably going to be one of the top 2 or 3 stories of the year. That's all there is to it. And real quick before I move it along, the other players that were involved, Patrick Reed also played pretty well, but he faded out there late. Bryson DeChambeau, as I talked about. Sungjae Im, who ended up in the top 5, but he was the one that snuck up and certainly was not really a factor when it was all said and done. So even though when you look at the score sheet and the leaderboard, although he ended up there amongst the tops in the top 5, I believe it was 5th overall, but yeah, he wasn't really a threat throughout the course of that day and even in the tournament, although he was hovering and hanging around, but still. But this was all on McIlroy. This was all he and Justin Rose, and you want to throw in a little Ockberg and DeChambeau early on, but this was one that everybody's going to remember. Just a fantastic performance there by Rory McIlroy, and what more can you say? And the guy that I picked to win, Brooks Koepka, was nowhere to be found. He missed the cut along with Dustin Johnson and Tony Finau and guys like that who obviously or always seem to be. And Dustin Johnson has not played well here over the last few years, so I don't know what's going on with him. But you had guys like that who, even the Cams, Smith and Young, were invisible here as they missed the cut. So now we look forward to next month at the PGA, the Masters in the books, and one that we'll remember for quite some time here, based on the heroic performance there by Rory McIlroy. All right, now let me move it along. Let me get to the NBA as I lace up the high tops and get to what's happening in the association, because now that the season is over, and now we can look ahead. First with the play-in tournament before we get to the postseason, and I'm going to talk about some storylines just for the play-in scenario. On Thursday, I'll get into the storylines for the postseason overall, because that's when in earnest it'll begin, and I'll give you a Saturday schedule as well as the schedule here over the next few nights when it comes to the play-in tournament. But the West was wild as it could possibly be. And even though on Thursday I could have speculated and thought, all right, certain teams that I feel are going to make it into the body of work as far as 1 through 6 that don't have to worry about the play-in situation. Well, the one team or the two teams I thought were going to be part of the play-in were going to be Memphis and Minnesota, which looked like if it was going to be chalk, obviously that would have been the case. But because that wasn't, it was a situation where Minnesota has now catapulted into the 6th seed where they could rest for the week. And they, certainly performed well here down the stretch, beating Memphis as well as Utah here over the last couple of days of the season. But the one team that really, I feel that they're going to hurt because of this, and I don't want to hear that, oh, because of who they are and because they have a player that rejuvenated the team in the second half, so on and so forth, are the Warriors. Now, the Warriors, and this is going to be storyline number 1, so I'll just segue into that, because even with the Lakers winning and at the 3 seed, they'll play the T-Wolves in the first round, and with the Nuggets winning out, they were fine. And the Clippers winning that game were huge because they went to 5 because of that, as they were also flirting with a possible play-in scenario, and they won that game in San Francisco at the Chase Center against the Warriors yesterday in overtime. So that was a gut check win, and James Harden, got to give him credit, played well as Kawhi did, but for the Warriors. And now let's get to the play-in storylines. They are pretty much 1, 2, and 3. And the reason why I say that is because when we take a look at the rest of the play-in tournament and the matchups that are there, there really isn't much, especially in the East, you can forget about, but Dallas, Sacramento, to me, it's all about the Warriors here. And did they jeopardize themselves of a long playoff run and maybe even a run to the finals, which to me, I think was a long shot to begin with. But if they had any shot, and that's not to say teams that are in the play-in scenario, all you got to do is look at the Heat a couple of years ago when they made it in as an 8 seed. And remember, they had to win 2 games to get in. It's not as if they won the 1 game and rested a couple of days. No, they had to win the 2 games and then obviously had a run to an NBA final. Are the Warriors capable of that? Yes, they are, but I don't think with this team, with their age, and I understand you can infuse a lot of the young guys that are in there, the Moses Moody's and the guys like that, who, Jonathan Kumingas, who are going to make a mark. But remember, people can talk about Jimmy Butler all they want, but Jimmy Butler's 35. It's not as if he's 25. And even though I'm sure he's going to rally the troops, although he's not the leader of this team, but I'm sure a lot of the veterans and even probably some of the younger folks are going to look for Jimmy Butler to kind of lead them through what will be I don't think it's going to be a tough first round match, because I know Memphis is going to probably throw everything at them. But I would think that they're going to win this game. But I will say this, if they lose this game and then win the play-in on Friday and then get themselves as an 8 seed, they will play OKC. I think there'll be a better matchup as a 7 against Houston than they would against OKC, because OKC has a lot to prove, and I'll talk about them more on Thursday. But I really think that they jeopardize themselves at least of a run. And I will say this, if anybody is, I know happy may be a bit of a strong word here, but if there's anybody that at least is relieved, how about that, is Adam Silver. Because if the Warriors would have won their game and it would have been the 6th seed, there would have been a scenario where the first round matchup would have been Lakers-Warriors, which I understand the NBA would have been jumping up and down and the NBA fan would have been ecstatic to watch. But what that meant was one of those two teams were going to be gone after this first round, and you know that Adam Silver does not want LeBron or Steph Curry out of the postseason after one round. Absolutely not. So at least there was one wish that if Adam Silver going into yesterday hoped for, well, he got it. But now he has to hope that the Warriors take care of business tomorrow night so they could be a 7 seed to go up against Houston, which would be a very interesting matchup, and hope to avoid the 8 seed because then they'll go up against OKC like I mentioned. But I think that they put themselves in big-time jeopardy. And I think they could have beaten the Lakers in a first-round matchup if it was 3-6. But as it is, we know that if they win tonight, or excuse me, tomorrow night, we understand that they'll go up against a young upstart Houston team that, who knows, they don't know their way around here. And we can discuss that if it does come to pass after tomorrow night on Thursday's podcast. So to me, it's all about the Warriors here in this opening part of the week. And the other storylines, Dallas, Sacramento, I'm going to hope for Dallas to win these at least tomorrow. I don't know if they're going to win the next game, whether that means they go up against Memphis or Golden State. But if you're a Maverick fan, and I understand no moral victories, obviously you want to beat Sacramento where you got to go on the road. But then if you somehow, some way find a way to beat either Golden State or Memphis to get to an 8 seed against OKC, I'm sure you're going to be ecstatic. And let's say they lose a tough 6-game or maybe even 7-game series, but that will also be a bad sign because if they do make it to the 8 seed to play Oklahoma City, remember, that's who they lost to in the second round last year. And I'm sure they're going to want to exact some revenge, granted that there's no Luka, and obviously Kyrie's not going to be dressed up anytime soon, and Anthony Davis was not part of the team last year, so it is a different cast of characters, but I'm sure Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, etc., they're going to have their eyes set on whomever they play, but if it happens to be Dallas, you know they're going to want to get rid of that bad taste of their mouths from last playoff because of the team that they lost to that went to an NBA final. So just keep that in mind. And in the East, I mean, seriously, Atlanta, Orlando, Miami, Chicago, these are the teams I have to root for. And not that I'm rooting for them, but if anything, you want to see what Orlando's going to do because they are a team that's young and they do have a young core. And last year they lost a tough 7-game series to the Cavaliers. And granted, if they do win this game, they'll play the Celtics in the first round. So who knows? Now, it's not going to be an easy trip to Boston, or if they do end up being an 8 seed, a trip to Cleveland, which will be a rematch of last year's first round, but they were the 4-5 matchup. This would be a 1-8. But I don't know what Orlando's going to do here. Do I trust them? Do I think that they're going to beat the Hawks? I think they can. I actually think they will, although Atlanta's feisty, and with Trae Young, and who knows, he's capable of pulling out a 45-game, 11-assist, 45-point, 11-assist type game. But I could see Orlando winning that first round, and then Atlanta will play the winner of the Bulls and Heat. But to me, it's a coin flip. I don't know who's going to come out of that Miami-Chicago. You would think the Bulls, but Miami, they could turn things around. And who knows, maybe Heat culture all of a sudden now rears its ugly head for a game or two. Last year, they got bounced in the first round against the Celtics, as you know, but they did have to deal with the play-in, and they did qualify for the entire body of work there in the Eastern Conference 1 through 8. So with Eric Spoelstra and company, you never know. But to me, the East is just, it is just bad. And they're going to be sacrificial lambs to the Cavaliers and the Celtics when it's all said and done. And that's pretty much what you have there as far as the storylines, because to me, it's all about Golden State here. And especially if they lose that game tomorrow night, oh my God, the pressure is going to be all on them times a zillion. Because let me throw this in the mix, which I haven't even discussed. The Warriors in the play-in over the years has not been good. They have lost games. They have lost 2 home games. And it's been a situation where, I'm actually going to pull this up now as I speak. The Warriors have not been very successful here in this home scenario, in this play-in scenario. In 4 years ago, 2021, they lost in the play-in scenario where they lost multiple back-to-back games. And then last year, they lost the play-in to the Lakers, I believe, in the I think it was the 9-10 matchup, if I'm not mistaken. and you had a scenario, or maybe it was 7-8. I don't recall. Let me pull this up here. I got it right in front of me. No, they lost to Sacramento last year. That's right. Sacramento, remember, Sacramento lost to them 2 years ago in that opening round, and then they played each other in the play-in last year, and the Kings won to get a little bit of revenge before losing in that second game. But they lost at Sacramento last year, and then in 2021, they lost to the Lakers that year, and then they lost at home to Memphis. So it's not as if they're an automatic just because they're the Warriors, just because they have the pedigree and Steph Curry, Draymond Green, etc. So by all means, this isn't going to be a shoo-in for the Warriors to all of a sudden advance and be a 7 seed to go up against the Rockets. So let's just keep that in mind here, as not only that loss to the Clippers yesterday, but maybe the one big loss out of all was the one against the Spurs there on Wednesday. And the Spurs actually played feisty down the stretch, which I'll get to in a little bit. But to me, it's all about the Warriors. Let's see what happens. And tomorrow night, that's where the play-in will begin. Your first game is Orlando hosting Atlanta, and I believe that's a TNT game. Let me pull up the schedule here before I continue. You have that being the first matchup, and then on Wednesday, your double dip will be as such: Miami at Chicago, and then you have Dallas at Sacramento. Both games on Tuesday and Wednesday, 7:30 and 10 p.m. You have TNT tomorrow night, ESPN on Wednesday night, and we'll recap that on Thursday, and of course have a playoff preview on Thursday's podcast. Now, I understand we're not going to get the 8 seeds until we get to late Friday night, which will be determined, obviously. The first game will be on TNT, second game on ESPN. Obviously, the East will play the first, West the second game. And that'll be Friday. Both of those matchups on Friday will play on Sunday, where you'll have Cleveland, Boston, OKC, and Houston. So that will be your opening round scenario come Sunday, which obviously needs to be determined. Your Saturday schedule will be 1 o'clock ESPN, all ESPN games, including the nightcap, which will be an ABC game. Milwaukee at Indiana at 1. Clippers in Denver at 3:30. Detroit at the Knicks at 6. And Minnesota at the Lakers there as the nightcap, 8:30 ESPN. ABC. So that is your scenario. Now, before I wrap up and move it along, remember I was talking about San Antonio playing well here down the stretch? Well, I got to thank them for this reason and this reason only. Not only did they beat the Warriors that they did the other night there and pretty much thwarted the Warriors down to the 7th seed and their aspirations to make it into the top 6, but they were down 22 to the Toronto Raptors. Toronto Raptors? JAYREELZ, why are you bringing this up? Down 22. And they came all the way back to win that game. And the reason why I bring it up is because I had Toronto as an under at 30.5. And going into that game yesterday, Toronto was 30-51. So if they would have won that game, they would have lost. And as it was, the Spurs win. Therefore, they're an under for the 2024-2025 season. And therefore, yours truly was 5-1 with his NBA over-unders. My only under was Sacramento. And obviously with Mike Brown and trading De'Aaron Fox, and even though they made the playoffs, but they fell under 46.5. That was their number. That was my only loss. Memphis at 45.5. Houston, that was a great pick, 42.5. Those are my overs. My unders, Philadelphia 52.5, excellent pick. Miami 44.5, excellent pick. And then Toronto, on the very last day, I was able to survive there. And again, 5-1 for my over-unders. So that is your NBA. Let me lace up the skates and I'll go through the National Hockey League, as there, quite frankly, is not much to discuss. In fact, the big storyline that I have, and I know Gary Bettman, cover your ears, this is not going to bode well if you're a casual sports fan or a fan that knows hockey enough but likes to just pop up during the playoffs, that throughout the course of the 82-game regular season, you're not going to watch, or maybe here and there you'll peek in, or, oh, wow, this highlight, or, oh, hey, where's the Winter Classic, or whatever it may be. But you have a scenario where, as of right this very second, it is official. When it comes to 4 teams that are not going to be a part of the postseason, and for big teams, big markets, big cities. And here comes the hammer for the final nail in that coffin. Original 6 cities. And let's put it out there. Quite frankly, because there's one team that's still alive in the Eastern Conference when it comes to getting the final wild card spot, with the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are now maybe too little too late, but they're 3 points behind the second runner-up in the wild card, where that team has tripped up here down the stretch. Now, they host one of those original 6 teams tonight in the Chicago Blackhawks in their building. With a win, they're in. But if they lose and Columbus wins, they still have a shot to get that second seed, which would knock out another original 6 team. We know about Chicago. They're one of those 4 teams that I mentioned out of the postseason. Well, long out because they've been in last place and going nowhere. The Boston Bruins not making it into the playoffs. The New York Rangers have not qualified for the postseason. And the Detroit Red Wings, also another team that are not going to make the playoffs. So think about it. You already have 4 original 6 teams. Boston, Chicago, Detroit, New York, and the Rangers out. So if you're wondering if any of those teams are going to make it to the playoffs where you can kind of keep your eye on, nowhere to be found. And then Gary Bettman, I'm sure he has his fingers crossed as I'm saying this, knowing that if Montreal beats Chicago tonight in their building, they're in the postseason. Because if, let's just say for argument's sake, if Montreal does not make it to the playoffs, that would mean 5 of the original 6 teams are not part of the Stanley Cup Playoffs. The only team that's officially in right now are the Toronto Maple Leafs. So think about it. None of the American original 6 teams are in. And that is a huge loss for the sport. No matter how you slice it, dice it, it doesn't matter. Because you want to see those original 6 teams there. Especially, like I mentioned, for the diehard or for the very good hockey fan, all right, I'm sure they're going to be like, oh, it sucks, but you know what? It's all right. The teams that made it and qualified, they deserve to be there. It's okay. But again, for the fan that just hops on board come playoff time and are wondering where the Rangers, the Bruins, the Blackhawks, and the Red Wings are, and maybe even the Canadiens, they're going to say, why am I going to watch? And then you have 2 other teams that aren't a part of the postseason that have to throw in the mix. You're not going to see Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and the Penguins there. And to a lesser degree, you're not going to see the Islanders there. And that's my team. So you have a bunch of teams that are not going to make it into the postseason. Where, if you ask me, forget about the remaining games. I understand you can't do that, but start the playoffs now. Because other than the second spot of the wild card in the East, and even the second wild card spot in the West, because Calgary all of a sudden is making a charge, and St. Louis, after that 12-game losing streak, have taken a couple steps back, to where the Flames right now are hoping to make a charge to get that final spot. Now, we would think, and I'm going to look at the schedule in a minute, we would think that all will prevail for the Canadiens, even for the Blues, for that matter, as these teams will qualify. And then you also got to look at the Minnesota Wild too, because it's not as if they clinched as of right this very second. But with Calgary having a game in hand on both Minnesota and St. Louis, and they are 2 points behind St. Louis and 3 points behind Minnesota, they have an outside shot to get in. Whereas Columbus, they're going to need a lot of help. They're going to need to run the table, obviously. And they're also going to need Montreal to lose the last 2 games. Montreal wins 1 game, that's it, they're in. And I believe they could tie. I don't know where the tiebreakers lie right this very moment. But just put it this way. Even with the Blue Jackets winning 4 in a row and are 3 points behind, if Montreal wins tonight, it's over. That's it. They've etched their spot into the postseason. And Columbus, even with a furious rally, they'll fall short. But that's all you have. And in Toronto, I get it that they are currently 4 points ahead of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And even though Tampa and Florida could be going at it for the home ice in the first round, because if Toronto clinches everything, then you have to wonder who's going to get the second seed in the Atlantic, because again, they're going to duke it out to see who's going to be the team that has the home ice in that opening round. But other than that, that's it. You got nothing intriguing, nothing interesting. There is no NBA Western Conference where you have 4 teams jockeying for 2 spots when it comes to whether it be the wild card, the play-in, or even just to be a part of the top 6. Obviously, it's not constructed that way in the NHL, but you understand what I'm saying. It's not as if you have a bunch of teams battling it out for 1 or 2 playoff spots. Now, granted, maybe more so out west with Calgary, St. Louis, Minnesota, as opposed to what's happening in the East in the wild card. But again, you just want to get to Sunday. That's when the playoffs begin because the season ends on Thursday. And the Stanley Cup Playoffs will commence there Sunday night in what, to me, is one of the best weekends. I kind of wish that the Stanley Cup Playoffs would start Saturday because then you'd have wall-to-wall hockey and wall-to-wall basketball on both days. And I love the opening 2 weekends of the fall and winter sports because you literally have a game from 1 o'clock to about 11, even midnight, depending on where these games fall. And same for the Stanley Cup. A lot of those games will start maybe at 2 or 3 because they'll go like 3, 5:30, 8, and 10, of course, for the teams out west. But I love the Saturday, Sunday full slate of playoff games, which will begin in earnest this coming Saturday with the NBA and then Sunday with the NHL. And the NHL, they'll break it up a little bit because I think that they may not have a full slate Sunday. They may just have 3 games on Sunday, maybe even 2 for that matter, but we'll have to wait and see. We'll get the schedule there as we get deeper into the week. But that is it for the NHL. There isn't anything else that I can even unpack. Now, as far as the schedule is concerned, here's what you have. Tonight, like I mentioned, Chicago, Montreal, and this is just for teams that matter. New York at Florida, only because it's the Rangers. Only because Florida battling it out there for the division. And then you have LA and Edmonton, which is a huge game. And I get it. I didn't really talk about that. The Kings are 2 points ahead of the Oilers. Kings win tonight. They pretty much will wrap up the second spot, or really would be the 1 seed for home ice in that division. Because with Vegas winning the division, then you have LA. They'll cement themselves as the winner of the home ice between Edmonton and LA. So that is an enormous game that we'll look out for tonight. So we'll keep that in mind. But that's the only games of note there tonight. Tomorrow, Toronto at Buffalo. Florida at Tampa. There you go, people. That is right there, you would think, for at least home ice in that opening round. And it'll be interesting because tonight, or I should say, yes, with Florida playing tonight, which will conclude their season because they do not have any other games after that. Don't they have 80 games? Let me just double check that before I continue, people. The Panthers, so they're going to play back-to-back here where they're home against the Rangers and then they go to Tampa. So if they win these 2 games, they're going to put themselves in good stead to maybe get that home ice advantage. Now, Tampa plays at the Garden against the Rangers there on Thursday night. So it's interesting how they're going to pretty much play one another. Rangers in Florida, Tampa, Florida, and then Tampa, the Rangers to close out the year. So there is going to be a little bit of intrigue. Maybe not for a loser leaves town match, but nevertheless, you're going to have at least something to sink your teeth into if you're a hockey fan or wondering who's going to host in the first round or sneak through the back door when it comes to the postseason with the wild card. But let me go to Wednesday again. Wednesday, you have Carolina at Montreal, if it means anything. Edmonton at San Jose. That's if they lose. And LA plays Seattle tomorrow night. I didn't mention that, just to throw that in there. Vegas is at Calgary, so that's going to be a tough matchup for them. Utah at St. Louis. This is tomorrow, people, as I know I'm getting all over the place. So, one more time. For tomorrow's matchups, Toronto at Buffalo, Florida at Tampa, enormous game. Then you have Vegas at Calgary, and the Kings in Seattle. Wednesday, Carolina at Montreal, who knows? Edmonton and San Jose, as I mentioned. Winnipeg, I might add, they're your President's Trophy winner for this year. Last time a team won the President's Trophy and a Stanley Cup in the same year, I understand a little bit of an asterisk, the 2012-2013 season when the Blackhawks won. But remember, that was a lockout season, only 48 games, to where the Blackhawks had 77 points. So if you're wondering, for a full season, 82 games, President Trophy winner and Stanley Cup winner to boot, the 01-02 Detroit Red Wings when they beat the Carolina Hurricanes. So you got to go back 23 years, the last time a full NHL season President's Trophy winner for most points in the regular season, and also won a Stanley Cup. So keep that in mind. And then for Thursday, even though we'll be here Thursday, but just to discuss right now, Detroit at Toronto, Tampa, New York, as we talked about, and then Calgary at LA, if that means anything, because St. Louis will have concluded their season, and Calgary, who knows, they could be playing for a playoff spot, but obviously by the time we get to Thursday, it could be all locked up, or if there is an opening, we'll discuss and see what happens there. But that's what's happening in the National Hockey League there for the remainder of this week as the season concludes, as we all know, there on Thursday. All right, now let me pivot and go to the batter's box, get in there for some baseball. And really the big storyline here that's happening over the first 2.5 weeks or so, the Dodgers. Only because they started off 8-0. Since then, they've lost 6 of 9, 11-6. They're in third place in the NL West. And with the fourth place team breathing down their necks in the Arizona Diamondbacks. It's amazing to think that the start they got off, and we kidded around about 162-0 and 161-1, et cetera, with my guy out in the West Coast, Bio Zio, on YouTube. I had to throw him a shout out. He's a big Dodger fan. And for the Dodgers, who have now lost 3 straight series in Philadelphia, in Washington, and then the Cubs over the weekend, to where they got shut out 16-0, the worst home loss at Dodger Stadium in the history of the Dodgers. And then yesterday, lose another tough game, 4-2, to where, is the sky falling in LA? Premature to say so. We're only 2.5 weeks in, 17 games, and they have the Colorado Rockies coming to town. So a team that's 3-12 and is going to be the panacea for the Dodger ills here over the last 10 days or so. But you do have to think whether or not this is going to be a very hotly contested division here into the spring, middle of summer, and when we make the turn into the fall, whether or not these teams are going to be battling it out. I'm going to say right now that's not going to be the case, despite the fact that the Padres are 13-3 to start off their year, followed by the San Francisco Giants, who are 11-4 and came off of a series win in the Bronx over the Yankees, and I'll get to them in a minute. And with them at 11-4 and the Padres 13-3, the Dodgers are looking above them in the standings. Granted, they have the 2 extra games that they played in Japan, as we know, in the middle of March. But the Dodgers, any concern? I'm going to say no. It's only April. Get back to me when it's July 14th, maybe. And even then, you're past the halfway point of the season. You still have about 60 games to go, 65, whatever it may be. So I would not be overly concerned. I get it. I bring them up only because it's sports talk fodder. People could think like, oh, the Dodgers, they are human. They are the juggernaut. Oh, maybe they're starting to sleepwalk now. Hey, listen, they go through a bad stretch. All teams do so. And a little bit surprising. All right, they go to Philadelphia, lose 2 out of 3. All right, fine. Nationals, they lose 2 out of 3. And almost got swept, I might add. All right, well, that's a bit alarming. And then the Cubs, after beating them Friday, they lose the back 2 games, including that one in the middle, 16-0. You really think to yourself, all right, what's going on here? Now, mind you, Freddie Freeman's not 100% and hasn't been in the lineup. He pinched hit in the game last night. And this is a team that, again, they are going to be perfectly fine. They could withstand injuries, more so to their rotation, as we know with Blake Snell, who's out. They're going to be, and now listen, unless everybody's going to start dropping like flies, then you can really be concerned. But I'm not going to get wrapped up. I just bring this up because, right, wow, they've lost 6 of 9. They're in third place here in the division when they start off 8-0. And, all right, we can talk about all that. So I'm not going to get worked up on it or really think that, oh, look out, the Dodgers, I think that they're going to face some trouble here down the road. It is a marathon, people, so I am not going to really call them out or really think that they're going to be in any sort of trouble. Now, with the Yankees, are they in trouble? I won't go as far as saying that just yet because as I talked about the way the American League is and the way it may shape up, as it being as wide open as it's been in quite some time. But now with Marcus Stroman on the IL, and based on what the manager Aaron Boone had to say, he's probably not going to be on there for too long. Yes, he's going to have to sit out for at least 15 days, so that means 3 starts. But this isn't going to be anything that's long-term. We know about Garrett Cole. You're not going to see him walk through that Yankee clubhouse. Luis Hill, the reigning Rookie of the Year, he's not due back for probably another maybe 2 months at best. Now with Stroman on top of Clark Schmidt, who's been out for the start, although he's scheduled to start on Wednesday. So you talk about the Yankees breathing a sigh of relief and welcoming him in through those clubhouse doors. So you're going to have him toe the rubber there on Wednesday against the Royals as they come to town. Little rematch there, that division series dating back to last October. But their rotation is in shambles. Carlos Rodon, yes, he may strike out a ton of people, but he gives up gopher balls left and right, as evidenced yesterday to Jae-Soo Kim, who gave, I believe is his name. I know I butcher all these names, but he hit 3 home runs in the series and hit 2-0 for Rodon when they lose 5-4 yesterday. And yeah, their rotation, the Will Warrens and guys like that just aren't going to cut it. And Rodon is going to have to be that guy who's going to be paid the $163 million that he is. Now with Max Fried, obviously he showed up and showed out there against the Tigers where they had to sweat to victory there in that final game of the series there on Wednesday. But Fried showing his weight in gold. But for the Rodons of the world, now the Will Warrens, guys like that who are going to have to pick up the slack here. And even though Clark Schmidt's going to come back, Yankees 8-7. And think about this, they played 15 games and only 3 against the American League. That against Detroit, because other than that, they played Milwaukee, they played Arizona, they just finished playing the Giants, as we know, and then the Pirates last weekend. So I'm sure they're going to say, all right, enough of the National League. We want to play teams that we're more familiar with. And even though they swept the Brewers to start off their year, but now the Yankees, let's see how they do with the Royals coming to town. And who knows? Royals, who a lot of people think could be hit or miss this year. Could they have a good year similar to what they had last year? As I take a look at the standings, now the Royals are at 500, pretty much where the Yankees are. They're 8-7 at this moment, just a half game behind the Blue Jays. They're in the division, but the American League, the way it's constructed right now, the only bad teams that you have are the White Sox. Twins have struggled, and the Athletics, not great either. But everybody else is either 7-8, 8-7, 8-8, 9-7, 9-8. I mean, that's just how the American League is. Where in the National League, Mets are 10-5, Cubs are 11-7. We talked about what's happening in the NL West. So, and the Phillies are 9-6. Braves 4-11. That's pretty much the only bad team, with the Rockies, of course. Now, the Pirates haven't really done well either, losing 11 of their first 16. But a lot more top-heavy in the National League, as I talked about in the baseball preview. And with the American League, it's certainly a lot more balanced. It's a lot more of 500, below 500, just above 500. So who knows if that's going to play out that way, or will there be some separation? You would think. A long season, you're going to have teams that are going to break away from the pack. But that's pretty much baseball here in the first couple of weeks of the season. Now, as far as the Cubs, I know they suffered a big blow. Justin Steele, their left-handed hurler, one of their top pitchers, is going to be done for the year. He has an elbow issue where he has to deal with a flexor tendon. He had Tommy John in 2017. Who knows if this is a situation where they may have to go back in and reconstruct the elbow altogether. But even if they don't have to do that, they're going to have to put him on the shelf for the year. So they're going to lose a key piece of their rotation, as Steele's going to sit out for the remainder of 2025. As the Cubs, 11-7, as I mentioned, at the top of the NL Central. I'm sure by the time we get to the All-Star break, they'll probably bring back some reinforcements. Maybe not an ace, but maybe a 2 or 3. Who knows? That's for down the road. But the Cubs lose a big piece there to their puzzle with that, with Justin Steele being done for the year. And then now, let me see, is that it for the baseball? Oh, let's look at the schedule real quick to see what we got for the early part. We talked about there, Kansas City at the Yanks, Boston at Tampa, as they continue to play a ton of their home games, as we know. San Francisco goes down the turnpike to play the Phillies. Atlanta, Toronto, Detroit, and Milwaukee. Mets are in Minnesota. Houston, St. Louis. Cubs are in San Diego. That's a good early series as they go down the turnpike down the freeway from LA to San Diego. We talked about Colorado at LA. And then other matchups starting tomorrow with a bunch of teams having a day off. Cleveland at Baltimore. You have the Angels playing in Texas. That's a good early season series as the Angels have been okay. You have the Diamondbacks playing in Miami. So those are the series that note. I bring up Arizona because of the cluster that's in the NL West. But that's pretty much it with the baseball. As we get to the last juncture of the podcast, and that being the NFL. And this will be brief. And I bring it up only because now we have a situation where with the draft 10 days away and with quarterbacks being inked left and right, recently the developments in New Orleans where it looks like Derek Carr may be out for 2025 with his shoulder issue. Now, I don't know if he's gotten surgery on it or what's happening with rehab, but it looks like he could be out for the year, where there have been a lot of reports that in the draft, Sheuder Sanders, who a lot of people will think will go at the top of the draft, could fall back as far as 9, maybe even as far as 21. Now, with New Orleans, it is possible that they could go that route, that they could look to see whether or not if Sheuder Sanders is available at 9, and I think he will be. Now, we know Tennessee is the number 1 pick overall, and it looks like they're going to select Cam Ward from Miami. But then after that, the remainder of those teams from 2 on down are not going to pick a quarterback. The Browns at 2. Now, they just signed Joe Flacco to a 1-year deal as insurance. Remember, they traded for Kenny Pickett a few weeks back. Deshaun Watson, who knows what his status is going to be. We know he's going to have to recover from that Achilles. Whether or not he comes back in November or December, if the Browns are in the mix, and they're not going to cut bait, considering they own $46 million over the next 2 years with that guaranteed contract that the owner Jimmy Haslam doled out among that trade many years ago. The Giants, they brought in Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, so they're not going to draft, and they also have Tommy DeVito. They're not going to bring a 4th quarterback onto their roster. New England has Drake May. Jacksonville has Trevor Lawrence. The Raiders have Geno Smith. The Jets have Justin Fields. Carolina has Bryce Young, so they're at 9. Sheuder Sanders could be the next quarterback chosen there. And let's say, for argument's sake, he doesn't. You have the Niners at 11, Brock Purdy. Dallas with Dak Prescott. Dolphins with Tua. Indianapolis bringing in Daniel Jones to battle it out with Anthony Richardson. Atlanta has Michael Penix with Kirk Cousins maybe starting. Who knows with the money that he's owed. Arizona has Kyler Murray. Bengals, Joe Burrow. Seattle brings in Sam Darnold. Tampa has Baker Mayfield. Denver has Bo Nix. And then Pittsburgh at 21. Now, would Omar Khan have the, let's face it, the balls to draft Sheuder Sanders at 21? Or maybe even Jackson Dart? And that would be maybe a bit of a reach if they were to do so, considering that they need a quarterback. Because remember, Aaron Rodgers is still out there, and whether or not they bring him in, that remains to be seen. Yes, Mason Rudolph is the backup, but we don't have a starter. And are the Steelers willing to risk a pick similar to what they did with Kenny Pickett? Right around this, I believe they picked him at 20, where Pickett was your number 1 draft pick, played 2 seasons, and then was jettisoned to Philadelphia. And now a similar scenario where it could be Jackson Dart or Sheuder Sanders. Now at 22, the Chargers, they're not going to choose a quarterback because they have Justin Herbert. Green Bay has Jordan Love. The Vikings, they have the situation with J.J. McCarthy, and who knows, they could even bring in Aaron Rodgers waiting in the wings. Houston, C.J. Stroud. The Rams have, of course, his name is eluding me all of a sudden, Matthew Stafford. Ravens have Lamar. Detroit have Jared Goff. Washington has Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. You may have a scenario where Sheuder Sanders could be in the 2nd round. And I only bring that up because as a precursor to the draft next week, where does Sheuder Sanders lie? Where does he fall? Is he even a 1st-round pick? Does a team that have a quarterback on their roster, do they even dare to even think to draft Sheuder Sanders? To me, it's New Orleans at 9 or Pittsburgh at 21. Other than that, what, the Ravens aren't going to draft him. If they even think about maybe, oh, let's bring in Sheuder just as a backup. No way. I believe they just signed, or they signed as a backup there in Baltimore just recently. Not Gardner Minshew. Name will lose me right now. But anyway, who knows? So that is one story heading into next week where Sheuder is going to drop. And I'll talk more about that next week. But because of what has transpired here, especially in Cleveland, bringing in Flacco, and maybe there were thoughts about drafting a quarterback, we can forget about that. At least I think. Unless Jimmy Haslam is really off his rocker to be like, hey, let's bring a 4th quarterback on here, considering I'm paying one guy who's not even going to play next year in all likelihood, and a one Deshaun Watson, $46 million to go along with Sheuder and what he's going to make in his rookie contract and the 1-year contract to Flacco, which is not going to be much, but then Pickett. I mean, you're going to pay 4 quarterbacks on your roster? But you know what? That sounds like a Jimmy Haslam, Cleveland Browns thing to do. So, you know what? Maybe that's not so far-fetched to think that for whatever the reason, he may draft Sanders and then just hope for the best when it's all said and done. As we all know in Cleveland, it has been an out-and-out disaster by the lake when it comes to that organization. So you know what? At this point, maybe that wouldn't surprise me. That'll do it, my good people. What a wild ride this has been. And if you stood with me throughout it all, thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate and thank you for carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the Detroit Department of Life, the wonderful world of sports. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review on whichever podcast platform you listen to, Apple, Spotify, whichever platform that may be. Of course, the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. Spotify has video too, don't forget. But if you want to get the full experience, go to my YouTube channel. Please subscribe. I need all the subscribers I can get. I passed the 600 mark. I'm about 390 from 1,000. So one more time, as I say each and every podcast, take a screenshot, send it to yours truly, send it to the good, great, kook sports fan like yours truly, the diehard, the casual, whether it's a family, friend, foe, frenemy in your life, put it on your social media. Also share it with me. I'll share it throughout my social media platforms on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, or JAYREELZ if you want to throw it there. Please, people, as an independent podcaster who's doing this full time, 2 podcasts a week, including a Wednesday live stream on YouTube. Yes, Wednesday, every Wednesday, 12 noon, high noon, Eastern time, as I talk about what's happening in the world of sports. I'm also going to have some critique videos coming out. Yes, very soon. I'm in the midst of working on a couple, good and bad. And what I mean by good and bad, good videos, bad. Ones that I'm going to be, I'm sure, super passionate about, whether it's to the plus side for what I like or for what I don't like. So yes, you're going to want to keep your fingers on the dial and get to that YouTube channel. One more time, subscribe, people. Again, from the bottom of my heart, doing this full time for now 14 months plus and trying to blaze a path and trail in this business to try to earn a living doing what I love. Please support me, people. And I understand that sounds like I'm begging and groveling over here, but you know what? If I can't get the help from whether it's acquaintances, family, friends, strangers, and of course strangers may be the ones that gravitate the most, again, I'm your one-stop shopping when it comes to sports talk. As I'll detail right now, if you want to send me a question, comment, suggestion, do so at the aforementioned social media accounts or the email address, the JAYREELZpodcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. In the blood, in the DNA, from birth, talking sports with nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, unadulterated, unfiltered, unapologetic, unedited, with every fiber of my being. When it comes to me sitting in front of this microphone or camera, as I do all the time, the JAYREELZ podcast, always coming correct, directed, and full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.